What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we're actually going to be doing a pre-draft overview and analysis of the London Bulldogs here of the Relocation Football League. Right now we're on Madden 20. The next season, Season 6, will actually be on Madden 21 once that comes out. But we're going to go ahead and get into some of the pre-draft discussion with this team, recap some of the moves that we've made, kind of take a look at where the team's at, and where we need to maybe address certain positions in the draft and things like that. Obviously, I'm not going to give away all of my strategy, but what I do want to make clear here for you guys is that we have some pretty definite positions of need, and we've improved and put ourselves in a position, in my personal opinion, to be able to make this team better for next season by trading up for some of these draft picks. Now, one of our trades has not been approved yet. I will summarize that trade for you guys, and we'll take things from there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up my Instagram account for the London Bulldogs, because that's the easiest way for me to be able to summarize all the trades that have gone down, because there's been quite a bit. If you guys haven't been paying attention, I highly recommend that you guys start following all the Instagram accounts for the London Bulldogs, the Relocation Football League, all that different stuff, and the Relocation Football League YouTube, because they do podcasts on a pretty regular basis, usually on a weekly basis, but with everything that's been going on, it's kind of tough for them because they're so busy getting everything ready for the draft to do them on quite as regular of a basis. But with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some of the trades that we've made. So the first trade that we actually made was with the Pioneers. We actually acquired the first overall pick from the Pioneers. Now, if we look at our roster here and look at our draft picks, it's not going to show up as the first overall pick. And I want to be clear with that, of why that is. The reason that it's not going to show up as the first overall pick, and actually none of these picks are going to show up as the correct pick, is because the RFL is divided into two files. Because you can only relocate 16 teams in one franchise, in one connected franchise in Madden. So we have to have it divided into two files to make things work appropriately. And because those other NFL teams are in there, that kind of throws off the order of the draft. So the draft is technically going to happen where we have the first pick. This pick is going to be the 12th pick, and this pick is the 20th pick. So this one's actually correct. But with that being said, we traded in order to acquire the first overall pick, and in addition with acquiring the first overall pick, we actually brought in a speedy linebacker, a young linebacker by the name of Ronnie Santiago. Ronnie Santiago is 23 years old at a 72 overall. Like I said, he's athletic, and that was part of the reason that I brought him in, with 89 speed, 91 excel, and 87 agility. That was important for me because last year, one of the things that we struggled with as a defensive unit was just our lack of speed in order to keep up with our opponents. Obviously, our starting middle linebacker, who did play really well, our young superstar Shane Masters, only has 83 speed, and so that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but with the simulation style football that we play, we need some speed to be able to catch up with the other teams and be able to keep up with so many fast receivers and how much of a passing game it really is. So we made an effort to bring in a young linebacker like Ronnie Santiago. Now we have to talk about the guys and the picks that we gave up to get that. So in order to obtain the first overall pick, in order to do that, we gave the Pioneers the 12th pick in the second round, which was our second round pick, and we gave them our 5th round pick, which was the 12th pick in the 5th round. In addition to that, we gave them left guard Connor Bussing, 80 overall. He was a really serviceable lineman for us last year. We hated to see him go, but as I had mentioned in some of my previous videos, we had a guy waiting in the wings to replace him. So this is actually kind of a move that I had in my brain for a while, and that was bringing in Bronson Gray last year, signing him off of the practice squad in free agency, and he's a athletic lineman, a bit more of a run blocking type of lineman, and he fits into that guard role decently. I'm not going to say say he's an absolute answer at that position. So we also went out and brought in Crosby Edens, who's another guy that can play that left guard position if need be. He's a guy that, like I said, he's athletic, he can run block a little bit. He's more of a pass blocker, so he kind of fits more into the tackle side of things, but certainly a player that can move around and help us at that position. So I'm not too worried about losing Bussing, even though he's a great player at that guard position, because the rest of our offensive line is still very good, and that's one thing that's pretty important to note, because that will let you guys know that we're really not looking too much at offensive line in the draft. Now, what I will say is that Richard Porter is 29 years old, so he is going to face some regression next year, and he only has normal development. So once he hits 30, he is going to regress, so maybe we'll have to address the line, at least one offensive line position a little bit later on. But Lee Corona is young, Jason McBride is young, they're both good linemen. Jake Moffitt, very good player, he's a little bit young, he's only 26, so I can't complain there. We don't really have too much to address across the offensive line. So like I said, we got rid of Bussing, and we got rid of two more players that were pretty important. So if we go to the Pioneers one more time, we got rid of Harvey Ishmael, who, don't get me wrong, is a pretty good player, and towards the end of the season for us did start to come on a little bit stronger whenever he really kind of found his role in the defense. But what I will say is that he just didn't fit what we wanted to do on defense, so we traded Harvey Ishmael over to the Pioneers. A pretty good young linebacker. He'll probably play well for the Pioneers, and we kind of hate to see him go, being that he's so young and everything like that, but it's going to allow us to pick some difference makers in this draft, and you have to give up good players in order to move up in the draft like that. And then finally, we gave away Roland Kaiser. This was probably the biggest piece in the trade. Our right end, he had 10 sacks for us last year, I believe it was. He's an 86 overall with star development. Don't get me wrong, he's a great player, and I think that he's going to be a great player for the Pioneers, but like I said, we are searching for big time difference makers, and you only get those at the very top of the draft. And the Pioneers are a team that was in need of help at multiple positions, and so they were able to boost their whole team. I think that the Pioneers are doing a great job over there with their team, and we were able to capitalize on that opportunity by them getting multiple players that are useful to them, and us being able to move up in the draft and get a player that's going to be more useful to us and what we're trying to do as a team. So that was the first trade. The next trade to discuss is, let me find it here. We sent our 4th round pick to the Oklahoma City Bisons for 81 overall linebacker Daniel Horton. That one was pretty important for us, in my opinion, because Daniel Horton actually didn't want to re-sign with the Bisons. So what happens with that is he's going to walk from that team at some point, and the problem with that is you don't get anything back for them. So the Bisons were able to get a 4th round pick back for him. It's always good to be able to get some type of compensation back for a player like that, and we're going to have the money to be able to re-sign Daniel Horton to our team, so hopefully he will be willing to re-sign here, and he's another athletic linebacker for us. We are going to be making some defensive changes. As you guys know, last year we tried to run a 3-4, and we did it pretty effectively, but this year, with the directions that we're going to be going with this team, we're going to try to run a 4-3 defense. Now, that's not 100% certain. That's going to depend a lot on who we draft in the RFL draft. That's going to depend quite a bit on that. But with some athletic guys at linebacker, we have multiple athletic guys at linebacker. I'll show you guys all of these players. I think we'll be able to run a 4-3 a little bit better, because we don't really have a pass rushing linebacker, and we never did last year, and that kind of hurt us. And so Daniel Horton adds some nice athleticism. He actually finished last year with 100+ tackles. If we go ahead and take a look at his contract or his stats, you guys will be able to see what he adds to the team. So he brings over 108 total combined tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and an interception. So I think that he's a pretty good fit for that outside linebacker spot in a 4-3 defense, and I think that we did a pretty good job of revamping what we're going to be doing with our linebackers here. I still have not 100% decided on who's going to start for us, because one of the things that's important to note is that a guy like Santiago, while he's a lower overall, provides that element of athleticism, and I'd like to get him some playing time. And Duncan Bain, of course, is kind of on his last leg as a player. Yes, he's an 80 overall, and yes, he maintains some of his athleticism and everything like that, being 87 speed, but he's losing out on some of his other attributes as he continues to regress. He's only down to 74 block shedding, so he's starting to lose out on some of those abilities. So he might be one of the players that starts to get phased out of the defense. He might be one of those players that loses some playing time to a guy like Santiago. Like I said, that stuff is yet to be determined. There will be a lot of testing and everything that goes on in order to make all of that happen, but definitely something that I wanted to cover for you guys. The next trade, like I said, we've made quite a few trades here, guys. The next trade was actually moving up in the first round from our second round pick. So if you guys don't know, last year, this team, before I got here, traded away one of their top receivers for a second round pick off of the Pioneers. And so if we go ahead and look at the Pioneers, their top receiver is actually a guy that used to be on our team, and that is a guy by the name of Carrington Crowell. So for Carrington Crowell, we got their second round pick back last year, and that was before I was in charge of this team. So we had the first overall pick in the second round, which is a really good value pick, and we decided to take that pick and turn it into a first round pick by trading with the Voyagers. So the Voyagers now have our second round pick. We also added in a third round pick, and we added in cornerback Carlos Gent. So if we look at the Voyagers, they now have Carlos Gent, and they have a really solid secondary over there with what they have going on. I think Carlos Gent might be more successful in this defense with them because of the fact that he's not going to have that pressure to be a number one corner. Don't get me wrong, I loved him as a player. He's a great player. He means a lot to the Bulldogs organization, but what I will say is that he just never was that difference maker at corner that we need. And there's no getting around that. If you don't have that it factor, you just don't have that it factor. And so what happened with that trade is, yes, we gave up our second round pick and our third round pick to get there first, but we also got a fourth round pick in return. So that's what you guys will see on the screen here. If I go to the Bulldogs, we have a fourth round pick. We've maintained our sixth and seventh round pick all the way through, but this is where we get to our three first round picks, obviously, that I've talked about. So the first pick, this pick turns out to be actually the 11th pick because it's the 12th overall pick, which is our original first round pick, but the Snowhawks had their first round pick taken away, which was the 11th pick because of the draft scandal. So this pick becomes number 11, and then this pick, which is the 20th pick, becomes pick number 19. So then we have the 4th, the 6th, and the 7th. Now, what I will say, we made one more trade, and it hasn't been approved yet, but I'm hoping that it's going to get approved and we'll be able to send it through, and that is to actually acquire a third round pick in the process. So if we go ahead, I just need to pull up the actual trade to be able to make sure that I get it right for you guys. So we traded away Eric Myrick, our wide receiver, who's actually going to still appear on our roster here. So we traded away Eric Myrick to the Sentinels and our fourth round pick in order to get back a third round pick and linebacker Patrick Shivers. Now I'll talk more about Myrick here in a second, but I want to show you guys Patrick Shivers and why we're going after him. Like I said, we're making an effort to get faster on defense, so we're bringing in 23-year-old 74 overall linebacker Patrick Shivers, who has 92 speed. This is a guy that's actually pretty big for a linebacker at 6'4", 262, so there is some flexibility with him. He can play defensive end, he can play linebacker, he can do a couple different things, and it's going to be interesting to see how he can factor into our defense. And that's why I said a guy like Duncan Bain might start to get phased out of our defense because of the fact that we have a lot of these young guys with a lot of speed and their ability to hopefully develop and get some playing time for us. So that was that trade. So now we actually have a third round pick, which has not shown up on our team yet. What I do want to say, why we traded away Eric Myrick. As you guys know, last year we signed Myrick to a contract to keep him around because he did end up producing 700 plus yards and like 5 touchdowns for us. Personally speaking, I like Myrick, and I like how he responded last year and what he did whenever we kind of called him out and said that, you know, we didn't necessarily want him around long term. But what I liked more than what Eric Myrick did was in the minimal amount of playing time that Anthony Connell got, I really liked what he did. And I liked it a lot more than what Eric Myrick did. And so from that perspective, I think that we're going to benefit by having our top 3 receivers be Whitehead, Leckie, and Connell. There are a lot of great receivers in this draft, so there is the opportunity to pick up a good wide receiver to supplement this wide receiving core. Obviously, we're already one man down, so that is certainly something to think about. But I think that, at 22 years old, we need to hit that age where Connell needs to get playing time. We need to hit that point where we say, if we want this kid to get good, we need to give him the playing time to get good. And he's 6'4", 200 pounds, so he has the size to play on the outside. He's actually bigger than any of our receivers. And that, if he can play on the outside, which we have not seen a lot of yet, but if he can play on the outside, that frees up our other receivers to do some different things. Possibly Leckie or Whitehead play in the slot a little bit more. We'll see what happens with those things, but I think that this should help us out receiving wise, and it allows us to get a defensive player that I wanted and send away a wide receiver that not that we didn't want. We appreciate the contributions of Eric Myrick, but we get to send away a player that we didn't necessarily need in order to get back something that I feel we need more, which is speed on the defensive side of the ball. With that being said, those are the trades that have happened. We can go through and take a look at all of the positions by position, and we can look at the draft a little bit. So at quarterback, we brought in Dre Lawson as a backup for us. He actually was on our team towards the end of last year, practice squad player, and I ended up signing him, but you can't negotiate with that type of player. So he went to free agency, then we negotiated with him through free agency and brought him back on a couple-year deal. So Dre Lawson is currently the backup for Timmy Merritt. That could change. I'm not saying that he's going to be the answer as a backup for Timmy Merritt. Timmy Merritt has never missed a game in his career, so keep that in mind. So we don't necessarily need a backup for him right now, but there are some good quarterbacks in this draft. There is the thought that we could potentially take a quarterback later on if somebody falls into our lap that we like. At halfback, this was probably our biggest pickup of the offseason, in my opinion. We brought in halfback Vic Cage, 98 speed, 99 agility. If you guys haven't seen highlights on him, try to go find some highlights on him. He has multiple kick returns for touchdowns. When he gets into the open field, you're not catching him. He's a very electric athlete, and I think that he's going to do well for us this year. He's at the very least going to be our third down running back because we didn't have much of an impact on third down last year. Brandon Smithson might get some playing time as like a breather type of back whenever Vic Cage and Matt Wheaton get tired, but I can't see Brandon Smithson getting a ton of playing time this year. Matt Wheaton remains the first down halfback, but what I will say is Vic Cage I'm planning to give a lot of playing time to in the preseason to see what he can do, and maybe he can earn more playing time than he's originally slotted, but I think that he's happy to get an opportunity with this offense and be at least given the third down running back position because it's something that he hasn't really had the opportunity to do before. Fullback, Ashley Denard, that hasn't changed. Wide receiver, like I said, this hasn't changed aside from Myrick getting traded away. Like I said, this is a position we could consider to add somebody because, Stanley Whitehead's 28 years old, Saul Leckie's 30. Yes, these guys are signed in multi-year deals, and I'm hoping that Saul Leckie doesn't go down too much. I'm hoping that Stanley Whitehead over time doesn't regress too much, but it's an inevitability. Eventually, we're going to have wide receivers to replace these guys, but it's not an immediate need in my opinion. At tight end, we have Ben Hartman, who performed really well for us last year, and Thomas McDonald, who came on at the end, 90 speed tight end. Ben Hartman's a really good, well-rounded tight end for us. I like him a lot, but this is a position that I could consider taking in the draft. There are a lot of really good tight ends in this draft, and I'm, never stop looking to upgrade at positions, especially positions that could help out Timmy Merritt, and tight end is one of those positions. We could potentially find somebody that could be a huge difference maker for us, and if that happens, we might be tempted to take a tight end. Like I said, offensive line, we pretty much already covered all these guys. We brought in Crosby Edens to try and be flexible for us. You guys know that, if you've watched any of my videos, that I like these agile offensive linemen, these guys that are flexible, that can play multiple positions, that can move around, and Crosby Edens is just that. Everybody else here has stayed the same for the most part. Defensive line wise, right now we're set up with Riley Draft and Al Smalls on the left side, and on the right side Willis Savage and Isaac Wilde. Willis Savage is a guy that has some potential, so is Riley Draft. Riley Draft obviously in like a half a season earned 7 sacks for us, which was really nice to see. Al Smalls is a guy that is huge. He's 6'10", 270, so there's the potential that we could utilize him in some way. I'm looking for ways to get these guys involved. Riley Draft especially because he performed so well for us last year, but this is a position that we're looking to improve at, and obviously we wouldn't have traded up into the draft if we weren't looking to get a premier pass rusher, so that is something to be to note, is that these aren't going to necessarily be our pass rushers as we move forward. At D tackle we have Jack Brodine, who is great. Forgive me if I pronounced his name wrong, because I have pronounced it a couple different ways, Brodine, but he's a great defensive tackle. Tyler Keltner played a little bit last year. I didn't like all of the stuff that I saw out of him, but he's a decent D tackle. What I could be looking to do is improve the D tackle position. One of the ways that we could consider doing that, though, is moving Al Small to D tackles. I believe he meets the requirement for it. I could be wrong. It might be 290. I thought it was 260, but I could be incorrect on that. But he's a huge dude. He would be an interesting one that could potentially play inside for us. But we do need to address the D-line as a whole. We need to get a premier pass rusher. We need to maybe get somebody that could help stuff the middle for us. Obviously, we lost Harvey Hoover in the offseason, who was the other kind of D-tackle type of player that could have played along Brodine. Duncan Bain at linebacker. We signed Kerry Bowman as a young, speedy linebacker, somebody that, if he has to come in, has the speed to keep up with the competition. Middle linebacker, Ronnie Santiago. We had A.J. Waters around last year. And at right outside linebacker, this one was a big signing for us, was bringing in Sherman Foreman. Sherman Foreman is an older player at 34 years old, 79 overall at outside linebacker here for us. Really good player. I mean, he's a superstar. He's got some speed and athleticism to him. He's got good play rec and awareness, so he should play smart as a substitute player. Good zone coverage. I mean, heck, maybe he even ends up starting at some point if someone else is struggling or somebody else gets injured. I think this is a really, really good pickup for this defense, because he can play anywhere at linebacker, and I'm comfortable that he would be able to play well. What I will say is that he adds a lot to this defense as well. So not only Horton comes in adding 100 tackles, but Sherman Foreman comes in adding 126 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and an interception. Sorry, I have a tickle in the back of my throat. 5 pass deflections and a forced fumble. I need to actually get a drink. And then he has 97 solo tackles, so that's really important. Forgive me for a second. I'm going to get a drink because I can't continue with this tickle in the back of my throat. All right. Sorry about that. Moving on to the cornerback position. This is a position that we're obviously going to be looking at in the draft. Brandon Bowen comes back as basically the starting tight end at this point. Starting cornerback. He was the number 2 behind Get. Now he's the number 1. I'm not totally comfortable with him as the number 1, but we'll see what happens. Ronell Cosby, who moved from safety to corner last year, is there to help us out. We signed Isaac Lockhart in the offseason, which was a good one for us. He's actually a safety that moved to cornerback. He's got really good athleticism, really good, well, not really good, but a decent man coverage rating, which is good for us, and hopefully he should be able to play for us. Sorry, man, my throat. I don't know what's happening to me right now. Kasim Addison returns with Blair Reid at safety. The safeties are actually unchanged. Ike Page, I'm excited for. I'm hoping that he has another good season, and hopefully he can get a development upgrade from it. And then Algernon LaSure. And another big one that we didn't actually announce is Graham McLeod came back at kicker for us. So we actually put out an Instagram post about how he was leaving. He decided to reject our contract, and then the next day when we switched to off-season, he was there on our team still. So it was an error in Madden's system. So he is actually back for Season 6, and probably his last season if I were to predict it. I mean, he's 36 years old, a 78 overall. He's still got really good kick power with 95, good kick accuracy. You know, I could see him being successful for at least one more year. I doubt he comes back for another year after that, but it's going to depend on how much he regresses. And then Chandler Overton at punter. So that is where we sit in terms of the team and in terms of our needs. One thing I will say, and I preach this a lot, is you want to pay attention to how many draft picks you have and how many spots you have on the roster. So right now we're sitting at 47 players out of 53. So we have 6 spots on the roster. Well, we have 6 draft picks. We have 3 first-round picks. We have a 3rd-round pick, a 6th, and a 7th-round pick. So we have a spot to fill every, we have a draft pick to fill every spot on our team. Now, if you guys haven't seen it, go and look at the RFL's latest video, their latest podcast. They covered a lot of stuff in the draft, but obviously you guys are going to see that we have a lot of the top players starred here, guys that we're looking at. Something you might notice, we don't have the quarterback starred. It's going to be tough for us to draft a quarterback. I think Timmy Merritt is the guy for us for a while. Obviously, these quarterbacks are going to go early. I mean, there are teams that need them, teams that should take them. If they don't take them, they're probably crazy. The only way that we take a quarterback is if one of these 2 guys falls to pick number 12 / pick number 11. If they fall to there, I might be tempted to take one of these quarterbacks, but they're pretty much off the board for us. We're obviously considering all of the top defensive talent in Drew Brewer, Ray Franklin, Strotter, Staten, lots of good guys there. We're not really looking too much at halfback. Like I said, we're potentially looking at tight ends, linebackers, anything defensive. We do have a couple offensive linemen that are good put on our draft board just in case they fall to us into a good spot. That's something to consider. We have some receivers in here as well. But that's pretty much it. Like, you guys know what our needs are. We could potentially draft some help on offense, but for the most part, we need defensive help. We're going to be looking at pass rushers. We're going to be looking at defensive linemen. We're going to be looking at cornerbacks, safeties, all those types of things to help us out on defense. Could potentially be looking at wide receivers, tight ends, and those types of things. Like I said, I'm not going to reveal exactly who I'm drafting. Out of respect for the draft process, for the players, for the teams, for the league, we're not going to announce who we're picking first overall. So hopefully you guys can respect that. Hopefully you guys enjoy this type of update video with the RFL and with the London Bulldogs. Like I said, I'm sorry about what was going on with my throat there for a minute. I seem to be better now. In the last video, I announced that we're actually opening up a Discord for my YouTube channel here. So if you guys want to get in on the Discord action, make sure that you guys get a link. Go find that video and you guys will be able to get a link into it, or send me a comment. I'll be able to send you a link directly and you'll be able to get into the YouTube channel, the Discord channel. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Make sure you leave a like on the video, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good night.